A biker gang blocks an old trucker's rig on a Nevada highway, demanding hundreds in road tax from what they think is just another easy target. The leather-clad thugs circle his Peterbilt like vultures, banging chains against the cab while there. Scarred leader Razor threatens to crack the old man's skull with a tire iron. But when the calm stranger steps out of that truck, moving with fluid grace that defies his 70 years, the bikers have no idea they just picked a fight with Steven Seagal himself. The ponytailed driver they're trying to rob is a martial arts master who's spent 5 decades perfecting the art of destroying bullies without breaking a sweat. While Razor swings his weapon with murderous intent, the action legend sidesteps like smoke and sends the gang leader flying through the air to crash into his own Harley. The younger bikers freeze in terror as they recognize the face from 100 action movies. But now those lightning-fast moves aren't special effects. They're brutally real. What happens when street thugs discover their victim is Hollywood's most lethal martial artist? Can Razor's crew survive a highway beatdown from a living legend? What happened next would terrorize the Crimson Reapers for the rest of their miserable lives. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Peterbilt 379 cut through the Nevada darkness like a ghost from another era, its headlights carving twin paths through the desert mist. Behind the wheel, weathered hands gripped the steering wheel with the steady confidence of a man who'd driven millions of miles without incident. The trucker's shoulder-length gray hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and his face carried the kind of lines that came from decades of squinting into sunrises just like this one that the CB radio crackled with the usual chatter, driver's warning, about speed traps, weather conditions, good coffee stops, but he drove in contemplative silence. In the sleeper berth behind him, carefully secured and wrapped in moving blankets, sat the remnants of a life. Antique Japanese furniture, photo albums bound in silk ribbon, a ceramic tea set that had survived 3 generations. Each piece a memory, each memory a small weight on his chest. 3 months. 3 months since Miyuki had slipped away in the hospital bed, her small hand growing cold in his. Her final words had been a whisper. "Promise me you'll take my treasures. To Sarah yourself. Don't let strangers handle what we built together." He'd promised, of course. 45 years of marriage had taught him that some promises were sacred, even when, especially when, they came from the dying. The fuel gauge showed nearly empty, and according to the road signs, Dusty Ridge was just ahead. Population 847. Though one of those signs had fresh bullet holes decorating the numbers. The trucker shook his head slightly. Some towns wore their troubles on their sleeves. Dawn was breaking over the desert mountains, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Beautiful country, even if it felt lonesome as hell. The kind of place where a man could disappear if he wanted to, blend into the vastness until the world forgot he'd ever existed. But first, promises to keep. Mel's Desert Diner squatted beside Highway 50 like an oasis of neon and coffee steam, its parking lot dotted with pickup trucks and a single sheriff's cruiser. The trucker guided his rig into the far corner of the lot, setting the air brakes with a pneumatic hiss that seemed unnaturally loud in the morning quiet. Inside, the diner carried that familiar smell of bacon grease, coffee, and the faint antiseptic of a place that was cleaned thoroughly every night. The waitress behind the counter was a silver-haired woman in her late 60s, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this job since the Kennedy administration. "Morning, honey," she said, pouring coffee without being asked. "You're up early." "Just passing through," he replied, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made her look at him twice. "Coffee's fine. Maybe some wheat toast." Betty Kowalski, her name tag was slightly crooked, smiled and called the order back to the kitchen. The cook, a stocky man with grease-stained apron, nodded but kept glancing toward the front windows. With obvious nervousness, the trucker noticed everything. The tension in the cook's shoulders, the way Betty's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, the fact that 2 other customers had left money on their tables and departed without finishing their meals. He'd learned long ago to read the temperature of a room, and this one was running scared. "Quiet morning," he observed as Betty's hands trembled slightly as she refilled his cup. "Been quieter lately. Folks don't linger much anymore." She glanced toward the cook, then leaned closer. My grandson's visiting this week. 8 years old. I keep worrying about. She trailed off as a rumble of motorcycle engines echoed from somewhere outside town. The sound grew louder, then faded as the riders continued past. When his toast arrived, the trucker ate slowly, methodically, watching the interplay between Betty and the cook. Fear was a language he spoke fluently, and these people were terrified of something they couldn't fight. He left a $20 tip on a $6.50 bill. As he headed for the door, Betty called after him. "Drive safe, honey." He paused, turned back with the hint of a smile, his first show of warmth since entering. "You too, ma'am. You too." 5 miles west of Dusty Ridge, 12 Harley-Davidson motorcycles roared across the desert from the north, their engines creating a thunder that scattered the morning wildlife for miles. At the head of the formation rode a man whose face told the story of a life lived violently. Prison-pale skin, a jagged scar running from his left ear to his chin, and cold blue eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. Razor Rick Dalton downshifted as he spotted the wide section of highway where they'd set up roadblocks before. Behind him, his crew spread out across both lanes. Chains Murphy with his signature weapon coiled around his massive shoulders, Viper Williams with snake tattoos covering his arms, and 9 others who'd earned their colors through blood and brutality. The youngest, Tommy Santos, hung back slightly on his Sportster. At 19, he still had enough conscience left to feel sick about what they were planning. His grandmother would roll over in her grave if she knew he was robbing travelers, but the streets didn't offer many choices for survival. "Listen up," Razor called out, his voice carrying over the rumbling engines. "That old bastard at the diner left a $20 tip. Means he's carrying serious cash. We're gonna educate him about highway taxes." The gang members laughed, a sound like glass breaking. They'd done this dance dozens of times. Block the road, demand payment, watch travelers scramble to empty their wallets rather than face a beating. Most people paid quickly and drove away with stories they'd never tell their families. Razor was in a particularly foul mood this morning. His girlfriend had cleaned out his stash and disappeared during the night, taking $3,000 in drug money with her. Someone was going to pay for that humiliation, and it might as well be some random trucker who thought he could cruise through Crimson Reaper territory without showing proper respect. The engines idled as they waited, leather-clad predators positioned across the asphalt like a scene from a low-budget apocalypse movie. In the distance, dust rose from an approaching 18-wheeler. "Showtime," Razor grinned, revealing teeth stained yellow from years of methamphetamine use. The Peterbilt rounded the curve at exactly 55 miles per hour, and the trucker's foot moved smoothly to the brake pedal without hesitation or panic. He'd been expecting something like this. The fear in the diner, the bullet holes in the town sign, the general atmosphere of a place where predators had moved in and decent people had learned to look the other way. The truck came to a complete stop 30 feet from the nearest motorcycle, air brakes releasing pressure with a mechanical sigh. Through the windshield, he counted 12 riders, noted their positions, cataloged visible weapons. His hands remained relaxed on the steering wheel, but his mind was already running tactical calculations learned in places he preferred not to remember. Razor dismounted his Harley with theatrical swagger, flanked by his 2 lieutenants. He approached. The driver sighed and hammered his fist against the door. "Get your ass out here, old man. Time to pay the toll." The trucker cracked his window exactly 2 inches. When he spoke, his voice was level, conversational, completely free of the fear Razor was accustomed to hearing. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" Something in that tone, the absolute calm, the subtle authority, made Razor's grin falter for just a moment. But meth-fueled rage quickly replaced uncertainty. "Problem is you're on our road without permission," Razor shouted. $500 gets you through. Refuse, and we start breaking things that matter to you." The other bikers began circling the truck like a pack of wolves, revving engines, striking the cab and trailer with chains and tire irons. The cacophony was designed to terrorize, to overwhelm, to make victims panic and comply. The trucker absorbed it all with the patience of a man who'd faced far worse than amateur intimidation. When Viper Williams kicked the fuel tank, something flickered behind those calm eyes, the first hint of controlled anger. Finally, he opened the door and stepped down. At 6'4", he was taller than most of them expected, and he moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy his apparent age. No wasted motion, no nervous energy, just the controlled presence of someone who'd learned to be comfortable with violence. "I don't want any trouble," he said quietly, "but I won't be robbed." Razor's scarred face twisted into a snarl. "Wrong answer, Grandpa." The tire iron was already swinging toward the trucker's skull. The tire iron whistled through the air where the trucker's head had been a split second before. Instead of connecting with Skull, Razor found himself spinning through empty space as the old man stepped inside his attack with impossible speed. The trucker's hands moved with surgical precision, one redirecting the weapon harmlessly past, the other gripping Razor's wrist and using his own momentum against him. The Sunage throw was textbook perfect. Razor flew 8 feet through the desert air before crashing into his parked Harley-Davidson, both man and machine going down in a tangle of leather and chrome. The fuel tank dented against his ribs, forcing the air from his lungs in a painful whoosh. Tommy Santos stared in recognition, his voice barely a whisper. "Holy shit, that's Steven Seagal." The name rippled through the gang like an electric shock. Some had heard it, others hadn't, but all of them had just witnessed fighting skills that belonged in movies, not on a lonely stretch of Nevada highway. Chains Murphy charged with his signature weapon, 4 feet of motorcycle chain spinning like a medieval flail. Seagal timed the attack perfectly, catching the chain mid-swing and using Murphy's forward momentum to execute a hip throw that sent the massive biker crashing through a roadside fence post. Wood splintered, and Murphy hit the ground hard enough to rattle his teeth. Viper Williams drew his butterfly knife, the blade flashing as he attacked with practiced slashing motions. But Seagal moved like smoke, applying pressure to Viper's wrist until the knife clattered to the asphalt, then striking a precise point on his neck. Viper dropped unconscious before he hit the ground. 3 more bikers rushed simultaneously, thinking numbers would overwhelm skill. They were wrong. Seagal flowed between them like water, redirecting their attacks into each other, using their own aggression as a weapon. An elbow here, a throw there, pressure points that dropped grown men like marionettes with cut strings in 90 seconds. 6 bikers lay groaning or unconscious around the Aikido master, who hadn't even broken a sweat. The remaining gang members, including Tommy, fired up their engines and fled in panicked retreat, leaving their wounded behind. Seagal straightened his denim jacket and checked his watch. As calm as if he'd just finished stretching, Seagal knelt beside the unconscious Viper Williams, checking his pulse and ensuring his airway was clear. The man would live, though he'd wake up with a magnificent headache and hopefully a new perspective on picking fights with strangers. Razor regained consciousness, slowly, clutching his ribs and gasping for breath. Blood trickled from his scalp where he'd connected with his motorcycle's handlebar. He stared up at Seagal with a mixture of pain, fury, and disbelief. "You're supposed to be some Hollywood pretty boy," he wheezed, spitting blood onto the asphalt. Seagal helped him sit up against the damaged Harley, demonstrating both his strength and unexpected compassion. "Movies are just movies," he replied quietly. "But some things you never forget." He moved efficiently among the fallen bikers, applying basic first aid where needed. Chains Murphy's shoulder was dislocated. Seagal relocated it with clinical precision despite Murphy's stream of profanity. A broken nose here, possible concussion there, but nothing life-threatening. He could have killed them all in seconds if he'd chosen to. "You've got choices to make," Seagal told Razor as he checked the gang leader's ribs for fractures. "This path you're on only leads to prison or death. You can choose differently." Razor's response was a bloody grin filled with hate. "This ain't over, movie star. Nobody humiliates the Crimson Reapers and lives to tell about it." Seagal met his glare steadily. "It doesn't have to go that way." But Razor's expression showed he'd already made his choice. The scar on his face seemed to pulse with malevolent promise as he struggled to his feet. "You just signed your death warrant, old man. Mine and everyone you care about." Seagal stood and walked back to his Peterbilt without another word. There was no point in trying to reason with a rabid dog. Some people chose darkness and refused every opportunity for redemption. As he climbed into the cab, he watched in his mirrors as the bikers helped each other to their damaged motorcycles. Several bikes wouldn't start, and the ones that did leaked various fluids onto the highway. They limped away toward the north, already planning their revenge. Seagal put the truck in gear and continued west, but his mind was already working on tactical problems. Men like Razor didn't just lick their wounds and disappear. They escalated. The Dusty Ridge Sheriff Station was a modest single-story building with faded paint and a Nevada state flag hanging limp in the still morning air. Seagal parked his rig in the small lot and approached the front door, noting the reinforced glass and the subtle security improvements that suggested this wasn't the sleepy small-town office it appeared to be. Sheriff Linda Martinez looked up from her paperwork as he entered, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent dark eyes immediately assessing the tall stranger with the ponytail and denim jacket. "Can I help you?" "Steven Seagal," he said, producing identification. "I need to report an incident on Highway 50, about 5 miles west of town." Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly. She'd heard stranger things in 12 years of rural law enforcement, but not many. Steven Seagal, the actor, among other things. Seagal described the highway confrontation in precise detail, including names and distinguishing characteristics of the gang members. His account was methodical, professional, the kind of witness statement that prosecutors loved. Martinez confirmed everything he said matched intelligence reports about the Crimson Reapers. "They operate from a compound outside town limits," she explained, frustration creeping into her voice. "Makes arrests difficult without solid evidence of crimes committed within my jurisdiction." She pulled up Razor Dalton's file on her computer, showing Seagal a criminal history that read like a tour through the worst of American violence: armed robbery, assault, suspected involvement in 2 murders that couldn't be proven. "The gang's gotten bolder recently," Martinez continued. "I suspect they're connected to interstate drug trafficking, but proving it is another matter entirely. What about federal assistance? Jurisdictional maze. Everyone's got priorities somewhere else." She leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Seagal, I strongly advise you to leave town immediately. Razor Dalton doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive." Before Seagal could respond, her radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, we got a situation at Mel's Diner. The Crimson Reapers are back, and they've taken hostages." Martinez was already reaching for her gun belt. "How many hostages?" "Unknown. But they're asking for Steven Seagal by name." The sheriff looked at him grimly. "Still want to leave town?" The sheriff's cruiser raced toward Mel's Diner with emergency lights flashing, radio chatter confirming the worst-case scenario. Multiple bikers had barricaded themselves inside with hostages, including Betty Kowalski and her 8-year-old grandson. As they pulled into the parking lot, Seagal could see the shattered front windows and overturned tables that had been arranged as defensive positions. Frank Novak crouched behind his pickup truck, having escaped through the kitchen during the initial assault. "They came in fast and hard," Frank called out. "Razor's hurt bad, but still moving." They grabbed Betty and little Danny before anyone could react. Through the broken windows, Razor's voice carried across the parking lot, hoarse but venomous. "Steven Seagal, you got 1 hour to get your ass in here, or we start killing people, beginning with the old bitch waitress." Inside, Seagal could glimpse Betty holding Danny close. The boy's face streaked with tears, but his grandmother's expression fierce with protective fury. The sight of that terrified child made something cold and final settle in Seagal's chest. Sheriff Martinez was already on her radio, calling for state police backup, but the nearest tactical team was 90 minutes away. "We need to establish communication, try to negotiate." "No." Seagal's voice was quiet but absolute. "Men like Razor don't negotiate. They escalate until someone stops them permanently. This isn't the movies, Mr. Seagal. We have protocols." Another burst of gunfire from inside the diner, followed by Danny's terrified crying. The sound cut through the morning air like a blade, and Seagal felt the last of his restraint evaporate. "These people showed me kindness when they didn't have to," he said, beginning to walk toward the diner with his hands visible and empty. "I won't abandon them to animals." "Seagal, wait. This is my choice, Sheriff." Behind him, Martinez drew her sidearm and took position behind her cruiser, knowing she was about to witness something that would haunt her dreams or inspire her legends. Seagal approached the shattered front door of Mel's Diner, where innocent people waited for salvation and desperate men prepared for war. Seagal approached the diner's entrance with his hands raised, moving with the deliberate calm of a man walking into hell by choice. Behind the overturned counter, Razor emerged like a demon from the wreckage, pressing a sawed-off shotgun against Betty Kowalski's neck. His face was flushed with methamphetamine and pain, the bandage around his head already soaked through with blood. Well, the movie star comes to play hero, Razor sneered, his finger twitching on the trigger. How's it feel knowing you're about to die for strangers? Let the boy go, Seagal said, his voice carrying that same unnatural calm that had unsettled the gang on the highway. Your quarrel is with me. But Razor was beyond reason, high on drugs and consumed by the need to restore his shattered reputation. The diner's interior had been transformed into a fortress, tables flipped as barricades, windows broken out for firing positions, and 3 other customers huddled terrified in the center with Betty and Danny. Seagal counted 8 gang members. Plus Razor, noted their positions and weapons, mostly handguns and knives, plus Razor's shotgun. Tommy Santos stood near the kitchen door, his young face a mask of barely concealed horror at what his life had become. You got 10 minutes to get on your knees and crawl in here like the dog you are, Razor snarled, or Grandma gets both barrels. Through the chaos, Seagal made eye contact with each hostage, offering silent reassurance. When he knelt beside Danny, the boy stopped crying long enough to listen. Your grandmother is very brave, and so are you, Seagal whispered. I'm going to get you both home safe. Betty squeezed his hand gratefully, finding strength in his presence even as death pressed cold steel against her throat. The morning sun streamed through the broken windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like spirits in the charged air. Outside, Sheriff Martinez maintained her position, helpless to intervene without triggering a massacre. Inside, 9 desperate criminals prepared to discover why some legends were born in violence and tempered in blood. Time's up, movie star, Razor growled, his scarred face twisting with anticipation as Seagal moved slowly toward the center of the diner, hands visible and unthreatening. Tommy Santos approached under the pretense of searching him for weapons. The young biker's hands shook as they moved across Seagal's jacket, but instead of a professional pat-down, he leaned close and whispered urgently. There's 30 more bikers coming from Vegas. They'll be here in 2 hours. Razor's planning to kill everyone and burn the place down regardless of what you do. Seagal's eyes never left Razor, but he absorbed every word. Why are you telling me this? Tommy's voice cracked with emotion. My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She'd haunt me forever if I let them hurt that little boy. He pressed something into Seagal's palm, a folded piece of paper. Phone number and a name. Someone big is protecting these bastards. The paper bore a phone number and 2 words, Senator M. The implications hit Seagal like a physical blow. This wasn't just a gang problem. It was a conspiracy with political protection reaching at least to the state level. The compound's 10 miles north, Tommy continued, his voice barely audible. Auto salvage yard. They've got heavy weapons, explosives, military-grade stuff that came from somewhere official. Before Seagal could respond, Razor's voice boomed. Across the diner. Enough talking. You came here to die, movie star. Let's get on with it. Tommy stepped back quickly, his face a mask of forced hostility, but his eyes held a plea for forgiveness. At 19, he joined the gang for protection but found himself trapped in a spiral of violence that sickened him. Don't get yourself killed for me, Seagal murmured. Too late for that, Tommy replied. But maybe it's not too late for them. Razor fired his shotgun into the ceiling, raining plaster down on everyone. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, and Danny began crying again. Betty held him tighter, whispering prayers in a mixture of English and half-remembered Polish. Show's over, Razor screamed, swinging the shotgun toward Seagal. Time to teach this town what happens when you disrespect the Crimson Reapers. The moment of truth had arrived, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath as Razor's shotgun swung toward Seagal's chest from 6 feet away. The gang leader's scarred face twisted with methamphetamine rage and wounded pride. His finger began tightening on the trigger, already savoring the moment when Hollywood legend would meet Nevada reality. But Seagal was already moving in a lightning-fast Irimi movement. He stepped off the line of attack while redirecting Razor's aim toward the ceiling. The shotgun discharged harmlessly overhead as Seagal applied a blood choke, cutting off circulation to Razor's brain with surgical precision. The gang leader's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed unconscious in less than 3 seconds. The remaining bikers reacted with shocked fury, but Seagal was already flowing toward the next threat. He used Razor's unconscious body as a human shield while advancing on Skull Peterson, a bearded biker whose pistol was still clearing leather when Seagal reached him. That a classical wrist control technique disarmed Peterson, the gun clattering across the floor as Seagal used the captured weapon to provide covering fire. "Get down and stay down," he shouted to the hostages. The diner erupted in gunfire as the remaining bikers shot wildly, their discipline non-existent. They cared more about killing Seagal than protecting innocent lives, revealing their true nature as cowards who preyed on the weak. Seagal used the diner's layout like a chess master, turning overturned tables and kitchen equipment into tactical advantages. He moved with fluid efficiency, closing distance while maintaining cover, each shot precisely placed to disable rather than kill. A biker named Diesel Jones charged from the kitchen wielding a meat cleaver. Seagal redirected the blade into a support beam, then used an elbow strike to drop Jones unconscious. Another gang member fired from behind the lunch counter. Seagal's return shot shattered the man's wrist, ending his participation. Throughout the chaos, Tommy Santos pretended to shoot at Seagal while actually tackling one of his own gang members, evening the odds while maintaining his covered. In less than 2 minutes, 7 bikers lay unconscious or wounded throughout the destroyed diner. Seagal knelt beside Betty and Danny, checking them for injuries as sirens wailed in the distance. "Is everyone okay?" But Tommy Santos was staggering toward them, blood spreading across his white t-shirt where a stray bullet had found its mark. Seagal caught Tommy as he collapsed, the young man's blood warm and sticky against his hands. Betty immediately knelt beside them, applying pressure to the gunshot wound with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd raised children through decades of scraped knees and worse. "The compound," Tommy whispered urgently, his strength fading with each heartbeat. "They've got enough firepower to level this whole town. Military-grade stuff. Someone big is feeding them information about police movements." He pressed the blood-stained paper deeper into Seagal's palm. "Senator M. He's the connection. They're coming. All of them." Sunset. Tommy's voice grew weaker as Sheriff Martinez and paramedics burst through the front door. The young biker's eyes found Seagal's one. "Last time. Tell my grandmother. I tried to do right at the end." He died in Seagal's arms as EMTs swarmed around them, his final breath a rattling sigh that seemed to carry away what little innocence had survived in Dusty Ridge that morning. Martinez surveyed the carnage with grim satisfaction. 9 gang members dead or captured, hostages safe, but her radio was already crackling with worse news. "Sheriff, we've got reports of 25 to 30 Crimson Reapers massing at their compound. They're issuing ultimatums." The message was simple: deliver Steven Seagal by sunset, or the gang would assault the town itself. They had military, weapons, explosives, and the desperation of cornered animals. "State Police Tactical Team is still 45 minutes out," Martinez continued, but Seagal was studying Tommy's bloodstained note. The phone number and Senator M revealed a conspiracy that reached far beyond a small-town gang problem. As Tommy's body was loaded into an ambulance, his youthful face peaceful for the first time since joining the Crimson Reapers, Seagal made a decision that surprised everyone. "I need to get to that compound before they come here," he told Martinez. "These people have suffered enough because of me. That's suicide, even for someone with your skills." Seagal looked at the destroyed diner, at Betty comforting her traumatized grandson, at the innocent people whose only crime was showing kindness to a stranger. Sometimes suicide is just another word for duty. The afternoon sun was already climbing toward its deadly appointment with sunset. Seagal approached the Crimson Reaper's compound on foot at 2:17 p.m., having parked his truck 2 miles away and moved through the desert using infiltration techniques learned in places the government preferred to forget. The 20-acre auto salvage yard sprawled before him like a mechanized fortress, surrounded by razor wire and sheet metal fencing that glinted in the harsh afternoon sun. Guard towers constructed from stacked cars provided elevated firing positions, their crude construction offset by the very real machine guns mounted within them. Through binoculars taken from his truck's emergency kit, Seagal counted 37 motorcycles, an estimated 40 to 50 gang members inside the perimeter. The compound's layout revealed military planning. Someone with tactical training had designed these defenses. Overlapping fields of fire, multiple escape routes, stockpiled ammunition visible even from his concealed position. Near the center sat a fortified trailer that served as a command post, its windows replaced with steel plates and gun ports. But every fortress had weaknesses. Fuel storage tanks that could create diversions. Elevated positions accessible through the maze of stacked cars. Blind spots where the perimeter guards couldn't maintain visual contact. Most importantly, the gang members inside were growing increasingly restless and undisciplined as the afternoon heat built. Random gunfire echoed across the compound as bikers tested weapons and consumed alcohol. Their military-grade equipment was impressive, but their tactical discipline was non-existent. As Seagal watched, 3 black SUVs arrived at the compound's main gate. Through his binoculars, he observed men in expensive suits meeting with gang leaders. Confirmation of Tommy's intelligence about high-level criminal connections. The suited visitors handed over briefcases and spoke urgently with gang commanders. Even from distance, their body language suggested ultimatums and threats. These weren't street criminals. They moved with the confidence of men accustomed to wielding power behind closed doors. One of them, a silver-haired man in his 50s, gestured angrily toward the town. His expensive watch caught the sunlight. As he pointed, and something about his bearing suggested political authority, Senator M. Seagal thought grimly. The conspiracy was bigger than anyone had imagined, and sunset was still hours away. The real war was about to begin, Seagal memorized. License plates and faces through his binoculars, taking mental photographs that would later prove crucial in federal prosecutions. The meeting between gang leaders and the suited men revealed the scope of the conspiracy. This wasn't just local crime, but organized corruption reaching into the highest levels of state government. When the black SUVs departed, Seagal began his systematic disruption of the compound. Using skills learned from military special operations, he started with the motorcycles parked outside the main perimeter. Sugar and gas tanks. Cut brake lines. Loosen wheel bolts. If the gang tried to mobilize quickly, half their bikes would fail catastrophically. Next came the diversions. Using materials scavenged from the salvage yard, oil-soaked rags, propane, tanks, electrical components, he created multiple small fires throughout the compound. As smoke began rising from different areas, gang members scattered to investigate, breaking their defensive formations exactly as he'd planned. Seagal moved through the maze of stacked cars like a ghost, picking off isolated individuals with stealth takedowns. A sleeper hold here, pressure point strike there, improvised weapons fashioned from auto parts. His approach was methodical and professional. Neutralized threats while gathering intelligence. From captured gang members, he learned the visitors were representatives of a larger criminal organization spanning multiple states. The Crimson Reapers were just one cell in a network that used motorcycle gangs for drug distribution along western highways. During a close-quarters fight in the salvage yard's narrow passages, Seagal faced 3 gang members armed with machetes and chains. The battle showcased his ability to use environmental advantages. Car parts became shields, tools became weapons, confined spaces negated their numerical advantage. But as he moved deeper into the compound, alarms began blaring. His presence had been discovered, and gang leaders were mobilizing their full force. Over a loudspeaker, Razor's voice echoed across the compound, hoarse but venomous. "Find that son of a bitch and bring me his head. And get those trucks ready. We're burning Dusty Ridge to the ground." Seagal's worst fear was coming true. Instead of staying to defend their fortress, the gang was preparing for a mobile assault on the town itself. Through the chaos, he could see vehicles being loaded with weapons and explosives. Time was running out. From his concealed position behind a demolished Ford pickup, Seagal watched in growing alarm as gang members loaded weapons and explosives into trucks and SUVs. Razor, now wearing military-style body armor and carrying an assault rifle, was clearly planning to turn Dusty Ridge into a war zone. Seagal attempted to sabotage the vehicles, but there were too many spread across too wide an area. As the convoy began moving toward the compound's exit, he was forced into desperate action. A stolen Harley-Davidson became his pursuit vehicle as he raced after the gang column across the Nevada desert. The chase became a running gun battle through terrain that provided natural cover, rocky outcroppings, dry creek beds, abandoned mine shafts. Seagal used guerrilla tactics, appearing and disappearing like a phantom, picking off vehicles one by one with precision marksmanship that targeted tires and radiators rather than going for kill shots. His motorcycle leaped across ravines and skimmed along canyon walls as automatic weapons fire chewed up the landscape around him. The gang's superior numbers and firepower forced him to become increasingly desperate, taking risks that would have been suicidal for anyone with less skill. In the chase's climax, Seagal jumped his motorcycle across a 20-foot ravine to intercept the lead vehicle, landing on the roof of Razor's pickup truck with bone-jarring impact. The ensuing fight on top of the speeding vehicle showcased both men's desperation. Razor wielding a combat knife while trying to maintain control of his truck, Seagal using Aikido principles to stay balanced on the bucking metal surface. The battle ended when Razor swerved too hard, trying to throw Seagal off. The truck rolled spectacularly, throwing both men clear in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Seagal's motorcycle had been destroyed in the pursuit, leaving him stranded 5 miles from town as the remaining gang vehicles continued their deadly race toward Dusty Ridge. In the distance, smoke was already rising from the direction of town that he commandeered an abandoned pickup truck from a roadside gas station and floored it toward what promised to be the final battle. Behind him, the desert burned. Seagal arrived in Dusty Ridge to find Main Street transformed into an urban battlefield. The Crimson Reapers had established firing positions at both ends of the street using their vehicles as mobile cover, trapping civilians in shops and homes while automatic weapons fire echoed off buildings. Sheriff Martinez had organized a desperate defense with her 2 deputies plus armed citizens. Vietnam veteran Roy Parker clutching his old M1 Garand from the hardware store, and mechanic Diane Foster, whose 2 tours in Iraq showed in her professional handling of an AR-15. They were outnumbered and outgunned, pinned down behind overturned cars and concrete barriers. Seagal took charge immediately, his tactical training transforming a panicked rout into organized resistance. Roy, take 3 men and secure the hardware store. Use the back entrance. Diane, can you get to the garage and get us some vehicles for mobile cover? His calm leadership gave the defenders hope and direction. The street battle that followed showcased urban combat at its most brutal, both sides using buildings, vehicles, and street furniture for cover while innocent people cowered in terror. Seagal demonstrated his ability to think strategically while fighting tactically, constantly moving position to avoid enemy fire while directing other defenders. When 2 bikers tried to flank the hardware store, he intercepted them in the alley behind Murphy's barbershop, using the narrow space to negate their numerical advantage. The battle's climax came when Razor led a squad of his most violent followers in a direct assault on the defenders' main position inside Mel's diner. Again, the close-quarters battle destroyed what the morning's hostage situation had left intact, turning the community gathering place into a scene from hell. But victory came at a terrible cost. Roy Parker took a bullet through the shoulder. Several buildings were on fire. Ammunition was running dangerously low. Worst of all, as the immediate assault was repelled, Seagal realized this had been a diversion. Radio chatter revealed that Betty and Danny had been captured again during the chaos. Razor's final gambit was the cruelest yet. Meet him alone at the abandoned silver mine, or the hostages would die. The war had become personal. In the temporary lull after the street battle, Seagal knelt beside Roy Parker as the Vietnam veteran gritted his teeth while Sheriff Martinez applied a pressure bandage to his shoulder wound. Despite his injury, Roy's eyes remained sharp and alert. "Seen worse in Da Nang," he muttered, but his weathered face was pale with shock and blood loss. The tactical situation was grim. 14 gang members were dead or captured, but intelligence suggested at least 20 more remained unaccounted for, including the reinforcements from Las Vegas. State police units were finally arriving, but they were too late to prevent the next phase of Razor's plan. The ransom demand had come via radio. Seagal must meet Razor alone at the old Silver Creek mine, 5 miles north of town, or Betty and Danny would die. Sheriff Martinez argued it was obviously a trap, urging him to wait for federal backup, but they both knew the hostages didn't have that kind of time. Before leaving for what might be his final battle, Seagal drove to a small house on Maple Street, where Mrs. Elena Santos had lived until her death 6 months earlier. The current occupant, her neighbor Maria Vasquez, had been Tommy's honorary aunt and keeper of his grandmother's memory. He died trying to save innocent people, Seagal told her, kneeling in the small living room surrounded by photographs of Tommy from childhood through his brief military service. Your boy found his courage when it mattered most. Maria wept openly, but her grief was mixed with something approaching pride. Elena always said he had a good heart, just got lost along the way. She pressed an envelope into Seagal's hands. Tommy left this with me before he joined those animals. Said if anything happened to him, someone good should have it. The envelope contained photographs, license plate numbers, and documents proving the gang's connections to corrupt officials. Tommy had been gathering evidence for months, hoping to find a way out that wouldn't get him killed. Promise me you'll make sure the right people see this, Maria pleaded. Seagal's response was quietly determined. I promise. And I promise Tommy will be remembered as a hero. The sun was already declining toward the western mountains. Seagal met with Sheriff Martinez and newly arrived FBI agent Patricia Kane in the sheriff's station conference room. Kane was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in organized crime investigations, but she'd initially dismissed local reports about a Hollywood vigilante until she saw the evidence firsthand that Tommy's intelligence painted a picture of sophisticated criminal conspiracy that made Kane's expression grow increasingly grim. The documents revealed a drug trafficking network using motorcycle gangs as distribution cells across Nevada, California, and Arizona, protected by corrupt officials at multiple levels. We've been investigating similar activities for 2 years, Kane admitted, but we lacked solid evidence until now. She studied a photograph showing Senator Bradley Morrison shaking hands with known drug traffickers. This could bring down a conspiracy involving dozens of public officials. The network's scope was staggering. Morrison had been using his political influence to protect gang operations along major highway corridors, taking substantial bribes in exchange for advance warning about law enforcement operations and legislation that hampered anti-gang efforts. The black SUVs at the compound belonged to Morrison's security detail, Kane continued. Ex-military contractors who provide training and weapons to the gangs. Your actions have exposed something that reaches into the highest levels of state government. But exposure came with a price. Kane's phone rang with urgent intelligence. Morrison was mobilizing additional resources to eliminate the Steven Seagal problem. Professional assassins were already en route to Nevada. We need to get you into protective custody immediately, Kane urged. These aren't street thugs. They're military-trained killers with unlimited resources. Seagal studied the photographs of Betty and Danny that Martinez had pinned to the bulletin board. The 8-year-old boy's frightened face reminded him of promises made and broken throughout his life. Not until they're safe, he said firmly. Kane's expression showed she understood. In her 15 years with the FBI, she'd learned to recognize the rare individuals who chose duty over survival. Then we do this together, she decided. But we do it smart. Outside, the sun continued its relentless march toward the horizon, where Razor waited with innocent blood on his hands. The abandoned Silver Creek mine perched on a mesa 5 miles north of Dusty Ridge like a wound in the desert mountainside. Its entrance yawned black and ominous, surrounded by the skeletal remains of mining equipment that had rusted in the Nevada sun for decades. Seagal approached alone at sunset as demanded, but FBI agent Kane and Sheriff Martinez maintained overwatch. From concealed positions a mile away, their sniper rifles trained on the mine complex. Radio silence was essential. Any hint of backup would trigger the immediate execution of the hostages. The mine complex offered Razor excellent tactical advantages. Multiple escape routes through abandoned tunnels, elevated positions with commanding views of the surrounding desert, and the psychological advantage of fighting on familiar ground. He'd chosen this location carefully, transforming it into a killing ground designed specifically for Steven Seagal. Inside the main shaft entrance, Seagal found Betty and Danny tied to wooden support beams, guarded by the remaining core gang members, including Chains Murphy and Viper Williams, both recovered from their earlier defeats and eager for revenge. Their faces bore the marks of men who'd been beaten by an old man and couldn't live with the humiliation. Razor emerged from the shadows wearing tactical gear and night vision equipment clearly supplied by his political backers. His scarred face was a mask of methamphetamine rage and wounded pride. "Welcome to your tomb, movie star," he sneered, the shotgun in his hands reflecting the dying sunlight. But Seagal had prepared for this moment. During his approach, he'd planted explosive charges throughout the mine complex using demolitions. Knowledge acquired in military service. The charges were connected to a dead man's switch concealed in his jacket. If he died, the entire mine would collapse. "Mutual destruction," Seagal said calmly. "Kill me, and we all die together." Razor's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. The standoff became a battle of wills as much as weapons. Razor wanted to kill Seagal slowly to restore his reputation, while Seagal needed to free the hostages before triggering his final option. The mine setting provided a unique combat environment. With its own deadly rules, the negotiation shattered when Razor, high on methamphetamines and consumed by rage, decided psychological torture would be more satisfying than quick execution. He swung his shotgun toward Danny, grinning as the boy began crying. "Maybe I'll start with the kid," Razor snarled. "Make the old man suffer first." Seagal's calm facade finally cracked. Wrong move. His finger found the dead man's switch as charges detonated throughout the mine complex. The explosions created chaos and confusion as tunnels collapsed and dust clouds obscured vision, but they also provided the distraction Seagal needed. The underground battle that followed was claustrophobic and brutal, fought in near darkness with the constant threat of cave-ins. Seagal used his superior knowledge of the mine layout, gained during reconnaissance, to divide and conquer the gang members systematically. Chains Murphy died when Seagal triggered a controlled rockfall, tons of stone crushing the massive biker. As he pursued his quarry through a narrow passage, Viper Williams fell down a vertical mine shaft while trying to flank Seagal through abandoned tunnels, his scream echoing for several seconds before ending in silence. The other gang members panicked. In the darkness, firing wildly at shadows and hitting each other as often as they hit nothing at all. Seagal moved through the chaos like a predator, using mining equipment as improvised weapons and the mine's geography as tactical advantages. The final confrontation between Seagal and Razor took place in the mine's main chamber, a cathedral-like space lit only by Seagal's flashlight and the glow from small fires started by the explosions. Razor, now completely unhinged, fought with suicidal desperation, using dynamite charges in an attempt to kill them both. Their battle showcased the contrast between disciplined technique and drug-fueled brutality. Razor's raw strength was formidable, but meth had destroyed his judgment and timing. Seagal flowed around his attacks like smoke, redirecting the gang leader's aggression while protecting the freed hostages who were fleeing toward the surface. The turning point came when Razor triggered a massive explosion, bringing down half the mine. In the settling dust and debris, only one figure emerged carrying an unconscious enemy over his shoulder. Even in victory, Steven Seagal chose mercy over vengeance. Emergency crews worked frantically to stabilize the partially collapsed mine while Seagal, Betty, and Danny received medical attention from paramedics. Razor was airlifted to Las Vegas in critical condition, his body broken but his hateful spirit somehow still clinging to life. With the immediate threat neutralized, FBI agent Kane launched Operation Desert Justice, a coordinated federal assault on the criminal network using Tommy Santos' intelligence and evidence gathered during the gang confrontations. Simultaneous raids across 3 states targeted Crimson Reaper chapters, money laundering operations, and corrupt officials. The conspiracy's scope shocked even experienced investigators. Senator Bradley Morrison's network included judges, police, chiefs, federal agents, and business leaders who had facilitated drug trafficking for over 5 years. Morrison himself was arrested at his Las Vegas penthouse, surrounded by luxury purchased with blood money. During interrogation, Morrison revealed the network's ultimate goal: establishing permanent control over small-town America through intimidation and corruption, creating safe corridors for drug trafficking while destroying traditional community bonds that resisted criminal influence. Seagal provided crucial testimony, via secure video link from a federal safe house. His credibility as both celebrity and trained fighter lending weight to the prosecution's case. His calm recounting of events contrasted sharply with the criminal's desperate attempts to shift blame. But Morrison's arrest triggered violent retaliation from criminal associates who couldn't afford to let key witnesses testify. Kane received intelligence about a $2 million bounty placed on Seagal's head, with professional assassins already en route to Nevada. These aren't gang members or street thugs, she warned during their secure briefing. They're military-trained, killers with advanced equipment and no moral constraints. Kane assigned federal protection to everyone involved in exposing the network, but Seagal refused protective custody with characteristic stubbornness. "I've been taking care of myself for 70 years, he said firmly. "I'm not going to hide. In a bunker now." Outside the safe house, unmarked vehicles with government plates maintained surveillance, while federal agents coordinated with local law enforcement. The net was closing around the conspiracy, but cornered criminals were always most dangerous. The war for justice was entering its final phase. 3 black sedans carrying a 6-man assassination team arrived in Las Vegas at midnight, their occupants equipped with military-grade weapons and detailed intelligence about Seagal's location and habits. The team was led by Marcus Steele, a former Delta Force operator turned mercenary whose cold eyes had seen too much death across too many continents. Their mission parameters were brutally simple: eliminate Steven Seagal and any witnesses who could testify against the criminal network. They'd studied Seagal's fighting techniques, analyzed his psychological profile, and prepared countermeasures for his Aikido-based combat style. The assassins tracked Seagal to the Bellagio Hotel, where he was meeting with federal prosecutors to prepare testimony that would seal dozens of convictions. What followed was a running battle through the hotel's luxurious corridors, across the casino floor crowded with innocent tourists, and into the neon-lit chaos of the Las Vegas Strip. Unlike the undisciplined gang members, these men were professionals who matched Seagal's training and exceeded his firepower. They used advanced tactics, coordinated attacks, electronic surveillance, suppressed weapons that made them nearly invisible among the city's constant noise. The battle moved from hotel elevators to casino poker rooms, creating panic among hundreds of bystanders as Seagal fought desperately to protect civilians while eliminating threats. His priority became saving innocent lives rather than his own survival, a nearly impossible challenge that pushed his skills beyond their limits. In the hotel's service corridors, Seagal faced 2 assassins simultaneously, using industrial kitchen equipment as weapons while dodging automatic weapons fire. His movements were more defensive than usual, focused on survival rather than domination. The fight spilled onto a parking garage's upper level, where Steele's tactical superiority became apparent. These men didn't make emotional mistakes or fall for psychological manipulation. They were methodical killers executing a contract with professional detachment. Seagal eliminated 4 assassins through superior knowledge of urban combat, but sustained wounds that slowed his reflexes and limited his options. With ammunition running low and backup still minutes away, he found himself cornered in the parking garage's northwest corner. Steele and 1 remaining operative had him trapped with no apparent escape route. The legend was about to meet his match. In the concrete cathedral of the parking garage, Marcus Steele offered Seagal a final choice with the dispassionate tone of a man discussing business arrangements. "Walk away now, keep your mouth shut, and you live," Steele said, his assault rifle trained on Seagal's chest. "Testify against our employers, and we'll hunt you for the rest of your very short life." Seagal's response revealed the core principle that had guided him through 7 decades of existence. "I made promises to people. Keeping them is worth more than my life." The final battle between legend and professional was a masterclass in close-quarters combat. Steele possessed youth, superior firepower, and advanced tactical training. But Seagal had something the mercenary lacked: moral clarity that came from fighting for others rather than money. Their conflict ranged throughout the parking garages. Multiple levels, using cars as cover and concrete pillars as weapons. Both men were wounded and exhausted, but neither yielded ground in what became a test of character as much as skill. The turning point came when Steele threatened to execute innocent bystanders, a family of tourists who'd stumbled into the war zone. His willingness to murder children revealed the moral chasm separating a professional soldier from a mercenary killer. "The difference between us," Seagal said, standing over his defeated opponent, "is that I know when to stop." Using the garage's sprinkler and electrical systems, he'd created an improvised trap that defeated Steele without killing him. Even toward enemies who'd shown no mercy, Seagal demonstrated the restraint that separated justice from vengeance. Federal agents arrived to find Seagal providing first aid to his wounded adversaries, proving that true strength came from principles rather than violence. Agent Kane formally thanked him for his cooperation and courage. "The prosecutions will proceed, and the network is broken," she said. "You saved a lot of lives, Mr. Seagal." His response was characteristically modest. "I just kept some promises." But, privately, Kane knew she'd witnessed something rare. A man whose actions matched his stated values even when facing death. The legend had proven itself worthy of the story's point. 6 months later, Seagal's Peterbilt rolled into Dusty Ridge on a bright spring morning that painted the desert in shades of hope and renewal. The town showed signs of remarkable recovery. New businesses had opened, fresh paint brightened formerly shabby storefronts, and the bustling activity of a community reclaiming its future filled the air. The rebuilt diner bore a sign reading, "Tommy's Place," in honor of the young man whose sacrifice had exposed the criminal conspiracy. Betty Kowalski, fully recovered from her ordeal, managed the establishment while training her grandson Danny in the family business. The boy, now 9, had become something of a local celebrity for his courage during the crisis. Sheriff Martinez greeted Seagal warmly. She'd been promoted to chief of a new regional law enforcement task force focused on rural crime prevention. Her success in Dusty Ridge making her a model for other small-town departments. Roy Parker had recovered from his wounds and expanded his hardware store, while mechanic Diane Foster had opened a security consulting business helping small towns prepare for criminal threats. The federal prosecutions had resulted in 47 convictions, including Senator Morrison's 25-year sentence. Mrs. Elena Santos' neighbor had used recovered drug money to establish the Tommy Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund for at-risk youth, ensuring the young man's redemption would inspire future generations. During a quiet moment at Tommy's grave in the town cemetery, Seagal reflected on the price of justice and the power of individual choices. His wife Miyuki's belongings had finally reached their daughter in California, but the journey had taught him that some obligations transcended personal grief. As he prepared to leave town, Sheriff Martinez handed him a radio. "We've got reports of trouble in Barstow, California. Some new gang thinks they can intimidate truck drivers." Seagal smiled quietly, pocketed the radio, and climbed into his Peterbilt. The engine's familiar rumble was like a heartbeat, steady and strong. The legend continued, one town at a time, proving that as long as good people were willing to stand against evil, justice would always find a way. His truck disappeared into the sunrise, ready for whatever came next. 3 weeks after leaving Dusty Ridge, Seagal's Peterbilt rumbled through the pre-dawn darkness toward Barstow, California. The CB radio crackled with urgent chatter from truckers who'd witnessed the new gang's intimidation tactics, roadside shakedowns, damaged rigs, and drivers too scared to report incidents to authorities who seemed powerless to respond. The Iron Jackal's motorcycle club had moved into the territory recently, claiming the stretch of Interstate 40 between Barstow and Needles as their personal toll road. Their leader, a scarred ex-convict called Reaper Martinez, had learned about Steven Seagal's involvement in Nevada but dismissed it as exaggerated trucker gossip. "One old man got lucky against some desert trash," he'd told his crew. "The Iron Jackals are different. We're professionals." As Seagal's headlights swept across a familiar scene, motorcycles blocking both lanes of highway while leather-clad figures brandished weapons, he felt the calm settling over him that always preceded action. These predators had chosen the wrong profession in the wrong century, that he downshifted and applied the air brakes gradually, bringing the Peterbilt to a controlled stop 50 feet from the roadblock. Through his windshield, he counted 15 bikers, noted their positions, assessed their weapons and body language. Younger than Razor's crew, more disciplined, but carrying the same arrogance that came from terrorizing the innocent, the gang leader approached his driver's side door with theatrical swagger, flanked by two lieutenants whose prison tattoos told stories of violence and cruelty. When Reaper hammered his fist against the cab and shouted demands, Seagal cracked his window exactly 2 inches. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" he asked in that same calm voice that had unsettled the Crimson Reapers. Behind him, Miyuki's ceramic tea set remained carefully secured in the sleeper berth, a reminder that some journeys never truly end. The legend was about to teach another lesson about respect. 3 weeks after leaving Dusty Ridge, Seagal's Peterbilt rumbled through the pre-dawn darkness toward Barstow, California. The CB radio crackled with urgent chatter from truckers who'd witnessed the new gang's intimidation tactics, roadside shakedowns, damaged rigs, and drivers too scared to report incidents to authorities who seemed powerless to respond. The Iron Jackal's motorcycle club had moved into the territory recently, claiming the stretch of Interstate 40 between Barstow and Needles as their personal toll road. Their leader, a scarred ex-convict called Reaper Martinez, had learned about Steven Seagal's involvement in Nevada but dismissed it as exaggerated trucker gossip. "One old man got lucky against some desert trash," he told his crew. "The Iron Jackals are different. We're professionals." As Seagal's headlights swept across a familiar scene, motorcycles blocking both lanes of highway while leather-clad figures brandished weapons, he felt the calm settling over him that always preceded action. These predators had chosen the wrong profession in the wrong century, that he downshifted and applied the air brakes gradually, bringing the Peterbilt to a controlled stop 50 feet from the roadblock. Through his windshield, he counted 15 bikers, noted their positions, assessed their weapons and body language. Younger than Razor's crew, more disciplined, but carrying the same arrogance that came from terrorizing the innocent, the gang leader approached his driver's side door with theatrical swagger, flanked by two lieutenants whose prison tattoos told stories of violence and cruelty. When Reaper hammered his fist against the cab and shouted demands, Seagal cracked his window exactly 2 inches. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" he asked in that same calm voice that had unsettled the Crimson Reapers. Behind him, Miyuki's ceramic tea set remained carefully secured in the sleeper berth, a reminder that some journeys never truly end. Reaper's scarred face twisted into a grin that revealed gold teeth and a lifetime of bad decisions. "Problem is you're hauling freight through Iron Jackal territory without paying tribute, old man. That's going to cost you $1,000, cash only." The other bikers began their practiced intimidation routine, circling the truck like wolves, while revving engines and striking the cab with chains and crowbars. But something was different this time. Word had spread through the criminal underground about what happened in Nevada, and several of the younger gang members exchanged nervous glances. "I heard something about this truck," one of them muttered to his companion. "Heard the driver ain't what he seems." "Shut up, rookie," Reaper snarled. "It's just another scared trucker hauling cargo." But when Seagal stepped down from the cab, moving with that fluid grace that defied his years, Reaper's confidence faltered slightly. The old man was taller than expected, and there was something in his posture, a balanced readiness, that suggested dangerous capability. "I don't want any trouble," Seagal said quietly, hands visible but positioned for quick movement. "But I won't pay criminals for the privilege of driving on public roads." Reaper's response was predictable, a swing of his tire iron aimed at the trucker's skull. But Seagal was no longer there when the weapon arrived. The Aikido movement was textbook perfect. Step inside the attack, redirect the force, use the attacker's momentum against him. Reaper found himself airborne, crashing into his own motorcycle with bone-jarring impact. As he struggled to his feet, spitting blood and curses, one of his younger followers stared in recognition. "Jesus Christ," the biker whispered. "That's Steven Seagal." The name hit the gang like a physical blow. Some had heard the stories from Nevada, others knew the legend from movies. But all of them now faced the reality that their easy mark was Hollywood's most lethal martial artist. Seagal straightened his denim jacket calmly, his expression unchanged. "You gentlemen have a choice to make. You can ride away now and find honest work, or you can discover why the Crimson Reapers are no longer in business." The younger bikers looked to their leader, waiting for orders that would determine whether they lived through the next 10 minutes. In the distance, the first hints of dawn painted the desert horizon, promising either a new beginning or a very final ending. The legend had work to do. If you liked the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.